Welcome to Housing Developments.
I'm Jim Tobin.
And I'm Paul Lopez.
Paul, good afternoon.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah. And those on video already know that we have an exciting guest today.
That's right. The man, the myth, the comic strip hero, Dr. Robert Dietz is in the studio with us.
Hey,
welcome.
Yeah, it's great to join you guys.
Say hello to your adoring fans.
That's right. Hello, fans. Do I actually have fans? Are there economic fans?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that,
Especially in this day and age. Absolutely. I believe. Yeah, you have fewer fans than you used to, but that's okay.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it would be nice if we brought you in for good news, but actually we came here for you to kind of answer some of the questions that we as laymen are having issues with all the economic data coming out, especially all the numbers that came out last week, right?
Yeah. Let's start with HMI, right? Because that seemed to kick off the week for us. So the NHB Wells Fargo Housing Market Index came out down to 40.
Right.
Explain.
Yeah, third month in a row of decline. I think if you put it all together, the first part of the year was better than we forecasted. We had the HMI going up every single month.
Right.
Long-term interest rates were lower. And then we got to mid-year, the Fed began to sound more hawkish.
Yep.
The growth data came in better than expected, which sounds like good news, but it was actually bad news for long-term interest rates. And so housing affordability is going down. Mortgage interest rates are now well above 7%, flirting with 8%. And so we've seen 3 straight months of decline for the HMI, and we're back to levels that we saw at the start of the year.
Yeah.
That all makes sense to me, why the HMI would be going down. And I know that month-to-month data is a little noisy, but why would starts and permitting go up in the same month?
Yeah, I mean, it's important not to make a big deal about 1 month's data.
Right.
I think September, we saw a little bit of an upside surprise in terms of a gain in starts. Some of that could have been activity that was accelerated to kind of lock in buyers before rates moved up a little bit higher. I think if you look at the big picture details, we expect softening on starts and permits as we move forward, particularly for multifamily. And in fact, in multifamily permits, we've now, on a 3-month moving average, we got the lowest since late 2020. We had about a year where our forecast was basically more negative than builders across the country. Right. I think that's now over. So the Fed's gotten what it wanted, which was a slowing of economic activity. The challenge is we don't want them to kill the golden goose. We don't want to be in an environment where rates are so high that they actually start harming housing supply.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I guess my question was going to be, but economic data continues to come in stronger. So explain to me, they got what they wanted. It seems like they haven't quite got what they wanted, or they have. Well,
and maybe a question of, can they actually get what they want if they know what they want? So, if you look at wait a minute. I'll explain.
Okay, please. Allow myself to introduce myself.
That's right. Long-term interest rates right now are higher than we forecasted because the Fed on the short run has sounded more hawkish. The idea of maybe we'll raise the Fed funds rate one more time.
Right.
In the long run, they've engaged in quantitative tightening. They're actually selling bonds, which increases supply, increases interest rates. Right. As we mentioned before, economic growth is better than forecast, better than everyone's forecast. So the third quarter GDP number could be above 5%, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, we had it flat or even down a little bit. 5% growth speaks to the resiliency of the economy. Right?
Okay.
It's good news for demand, but when you got more economic growth, the demand for capital goes up, and it increases interest rates. So that pushes interest rates up. And then what a lot of economists and investors are focused on is something called the term premium. This is the idea that long-term interest rates could be higher because of other factors, including, this is what we've seen recently, the idea that the federal deficit is larger than expected, 30% more. There's a lot of supply of U.S. treasuries coming. Someone's got to buy them. China's buying fewer of them. Well, to buy them, interest rates have to go up. So you put all that together, long-term interest rates are higher. Now, here's the slightly concerning part. We know the Fed can control the first one of those, that short-term Fed funds rate. They can influence the idea of long-term interest rates being affected by quantitative tightening and the supply of bonds. But over the last week, some of those long-term interest rates are moving independently of what the Fed's doing. They're responding more to market forces and the idea that we're going to have a lot of supply of debt. This is why it's so important in the housing industry. We fight for policies where the government is fiscally disciplined. We don't have that now, and it's going to show up in long-term interest rates.
So, but before we go into the federal policy, though, like we saw existing numbers, existing sales drop like a stone, continue to drop. Is that part of the euphoria that's feeding our members?
Yeah, it's certainly helping support the demand for single-family construction. Is another one of those factors why the September starts data was better. We know in the inventory measures a full third of homes available for sale are new constructions, typically about 12%.
Right.
And if you look at the existing home sales data, sales are down 15% year over year. It's a lack of supply. You can't sell what's not on the market, and that's due to the underbuilding that took place over the last decade, combined with the mortgage rate lock-in effect. You don't want to put your home in the market. And then it's also an impact of demand itself, that the higher interest rates are pulling back some of that resale demand. So the existing home market is definitely down more than the new home market, but we're going to see some soft data for new construction as the year ends. So if the start of the year was better than expected, the back half of the year, unfortunately, is going to be worse than we expected.
So we know that the 10-year Treasury, it really is kind of the barometer for the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, right? And that spread is really high, historically high, right? Wouldn't you say?
270, 280 basis.
Yeah, and it should be about what, 130, 150? Is that about right?
150, 160,
okay.
But about 100 basis points lower than it is now.
Okay, all right, which puts us into the high sixes, but certainly. That could stimulate the market. Can the Fed, can anybody do anything to influence the spread?
Yes. And this is exactly why NAHB, with our partners at MBA and NAR, sent that letter to say, not only should you stop raising rates, the short-term rates, but provide certainty with respect to quantitative tightening. Because one of the reasons that spread is elevated, in addition to stronger growth, is uncertainty in the bond market that maybe the Fed won't just let these mortgages mature and roll off as a way of reducing their balance sheet, but they will dump them. They will start selling them. And it's all about the supply of debt right now. So if the Fed came out and said, look, we're still going to let these mortgages roll off, but we're not going to outright sell mortgage-backed securities. We're just going to do this in an orderly, slow process. That certainty would reduce some of that term premium we talked about before. And you could see then long-term interest rates go down on mortgages because the spread between the 10 and the 30-year would go down.
There we go.
I think the Fed is in a position right now, as it gets to the end of the cycle, certainty. They always like to keep things mysterious, keep investors guessing. Certainty would be good for growth, and that's going to help achieve the soft landing.
And that's what we saw last week, right? I mean,
Powell came out, right? Powell came out and said, as certain as he can be, still a little mysterious, but came out and said, we're done, right? Or
it was
done-ish.
Pretty close, done-ish. How you would order a steak.
Unless something otherwise provokes us, we're going to try and keep it flat.
I think that's exactly right. I think if you sort of read the tea leaves here, he was basically saying, unless CPI jumps, and again, we think like the shelter inflation component's going to go down, but unless inflation jumps, they're not going to raise rates again. Now, our forecast is conservative. We still have one final rate built in, but right now, if you look at the bond market and if you look at the 10-year Treasury rate, it's back below 5% again. It looks like bond investors have moved back to being concerned more about a not quite soft landing, and they're taking Chairman Powell's comments as potentially they're done.
And when it comes to the rates being held at this higher level, we think all through 20. You think all through 24? I mean,
I like how you're like, wait, no. This is on you, Rob. Go ahead.
It's usually when you're not here, we basically take credit for everything and just make bold predictions. But since you're here, we really are what you have to say. Now, Paul and I speculating on our Ouija board.
So this is one of the forecast items we have not changed on the Ouija board. We think the Fed will be in a position to begin reducing the Fed funds rate, which is the overnight rate, by the middle of next year.
Wow.
And the reason why is that restrictive monetary policy is determined by where the Fed funds rate is relative to inflation. If inflation's coming down and you hold policy constant, it becomes more restrictive because the after inflation rate is actually going higher. So forgetting, whether or not they make a policy mistake, if inflation's coming down, they can move the Fed funds rate down by an equivalent amount. So that's guiding that plane in for that soft landing. We think that happens in the middle of next year. the bond market a year ago thought that they would start cutting rates at the end of this year.
Right.
And what we've seen in the last 2 months is a capitulation on that. They recognize it's going to be higher for longer.
Right.
And that's another reason those long-term rates are up right now.
And do you see, you talked about the economic demand, the fourth quarter or even third quarter could be 5%, but doesn't that, if that drives demand, aren't we worried about inflation ticking up because demand is high but the economy's slow. You see what I'm saying?
If the path for the third quarter, which is greater than 5% growth, didn't face headwinds going in the fourth quarter, and particularly the first quarter of next year,
we'd be in trouble.
Our GDP growth estimate for the first quarter of next year is less than 1%.
Right.
And in fact, that's within the range where you can imagine a negative number. So these higher rates, they will have spillover impacts. You're going to see consumer spending go down. The student loan repayments are coming back online. We're watching credit card debt rise. I'm getting concerned about auto loans. These are all classic things that would cause slowing. So I think the risk here is really more biased right now to an economy that's slowing down quicker than expected after a period of time, late summer, early fall, where the economy was better than
Interesting.
expected.
Okay.
So a question that I always ask you when you're with us is, what's your best advice to the home builders right now?
Yeah, I think it's about patience. It's that rates will be lower, we think, certainly by the second half of next year. In the meantime, focus on buyers, cash buyers who aren't as sensitive to interest rates. If you're in a high growth area, it's less of a concern, and be watching resale inventory, because that's been kind of the trump card for a lot of builders during this period. But, I don't think any builder would be surprised. We do expect the sales data to deteriorate during the final months of 23. And then once we get that all clear signal from the Fed, something clearer than Chairman Powell has issued, and then maybe that comes November 1st. I think it's more likely in the December meeting. You'll start to see bond investors really, kind of purchase bonds because they want to take advantage of those high rates before they go down. Right. And that should help bring mortgage rates down. Not a lot, but put us on a glide path where maybe by the end of 2024, we're looking at a rate closer to 6% than 7%.
Yeah.
Excellent. I mean, because our members and builders at large continue to do what they need to do, right? Yeah. Lowering their prices somewhat, or adding incentives. So you figure that that's going to be the norm for at least the short term.
I think so. We've seen in the HMI about a quarter of builders are still reducing home prices. Not a lot, but about 6%, building a slightly smaller product. Square footage is down about 5% over the last 4 quarters. And about 2/3 of builders are using some kind of incentive, including mortgage rate buy downs. So it's taking advantage of the lack of resale inventory, being strategic, making those marketing business decisions to get buyers who are motivated to purchase, and they're still out there, but being patient and strategic until we really get that all clear sign as rates get closer to 6.
All right.
Good stuff.
Then always we have to talk about here in Washington what's going on.
Rob, maybe you have a forecast on the speakership.
What are the odds there?
What do you got?
I was thinking Speaker McHenry, but
I was too for a little while there. It seems like he doesn't want it though.
Smart man. Smart man.
Push it away. Yeah, well, he's either that or just knows that the job is it's a thankless job right now. And we saw Jim Jordan gone. Two ballots didn't quite get there, and then was booted by the conference as the nominee. So they'll meet this week.
We have up to 9.
I think it's 9 candidates. So they're all giving their speeches, I think today, and then tomorrow the conference will vote, presumably on one of them to move forward to a vote for the whole House later this week.
And it's the House Whip, right? That's considered the front
Tom
runner.
Emmer, great guy. He was the NRCC chairman for the last 2 election cycles and helped win back the Republican majority in the House. Well regarded. He's been in conflict with former President Trump over a variety of things. Whether that's enough to keep him from it, it's still Trump's party, so it's possible, if not likely. And then they worry, and then there's a lot of people think he's just part of the establishment, which means he's just going to be like Kevin McCarthy, or he's just going to be like Steve Scalise, that he's going to cut a deal on the appropriations. We're less than a month away from another I could call it a cliff, I guess, but the funding of the government's going to run out on the 17th of November, and whoever inherits this job is going to have to fix that problem first.
When do we start getting nervous, or when should we start getting nervous?
About 3 weeks ago. Yeah, no. I mean, as soon as Kevin McCarthy got booted, I think that's when that's my leading indicator.
Fair.
I just think there's no plan B, we should get nervous. My gut says that at the end of the day, they'll have empowered somebody. Maybe they give McHenry just enough to run this, and he just does a CR till right before the holidays in mid to late December, and then we see if we can come up with some answer there. And if not, part of me thinks just fund the government through September 30th of 2024. Get this off the table. You freeze it. You lock everything in at 2023 numbers, which is kind of a win for conservatives. Yeah. But it just takes this issue off the table. But until then, we've got, the war in Israel is still the war in Ukraine. Yeah. It's a real bad time to have one chamber of 1/3 of the government be completely sidelined.
And if there's one thing the bond market hates, as we said before, it's uncertainty, political or economic.
Yeah, right.
Anything they can add to uncertainty would help builders. Right?
Yeah, and you've got government leaders, congressional leaders, talking about a wider war in the Middle East and a proxy war with Iran. And I mean, it's just tough times. And boy, anyway, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, no one has, right?
Yeah,
ever.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah. Where are you off to next?
I'm going to northern Colorado and Acadia, Louisiana. Coming up. So.
Nice. Look at you. Get a little Cajun food, a little cayenne pepper.
That's right. I'm looking forward to it.
Hit your hunger spot good. Looking forward to all my friends in Louisiana. That was a terrible. What was that guy? Who's the Cajun chef? Remember that guy?
It's the Connecticut version of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you can hear my New York Boston accent coming through there. Well, I'll be in South Dakota next week. I'm looking forward to that. Also doing some planning with Carl Harris and his team. Looking forward to 2024. So we'll see you in a town near you. How's that sound? Yeah. Well, Rob, glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Always a treat to have you in studio. And thanks for your insights as always.
Let's do some shout outs. Reagan Hansford, our producer, way to go.
Producer Reagan.
That's right. NHB Productions for setting all this cool stuff up and recording all this.
Yep.
Big shout out for our youngest and most loyal listener, Logan. We'll not say his last name to keep his secret identity, but
that's right.
He is a diehard watcher of the podcast. Yeah, I think he's all of 12 years old.
That's right. Well,
so big shout out. So thank you, Logan, for that. But with that,
until next time. Yeah, I'm Jim Tobin.
I'm Paul Lopez.
See you.
Take care.